with the UK Newton Fund. They've come on board to totally support our young startups. We take 10 startups a year to the UK where they're able to look at commercial output. So what we found that in South Africa, our startups are not short of great ideas, great models to get them somewhere. But what we are short of is how do we commercialize at the end of the day? And I think key to that is what TIA plays. It's called in the valley of death, because you have really good research outputs and it never ever sees the market access. And I think that's clear, in terms of working with CEDA. How do we then pre-incubate and support these startups so that they would have great commercial viability? Another key program that we look at is the one with Switzerland. It's a venture leader program. Similarly, we find that we're able to take these startups, they're able to pitch to us with VC companies, and from there, they look at, is their product viable for the European Union? So I think key for us is, what are the local solutions for our problems that we have, and how will we scale it? And I think that's key for us, and the reason why we embarked on our latest journey, which is looking at Silicon Valley for the reason not of accessing US markets, but rather for how do we scale a startup that exists in South Africa or Africa for global access. And I think that's very, very clear for us, that after doing a lot of research and homework and actually visiting Silicon Valley, we found that the business modeling and the accelerator programs that exist, it's about a whole mindset change. It's about a culture shift in terms of how do we create capacity and skill for the young startups locally, and they will then be able to bring back what they learn in the Bay Area back home, and we can create our own network. And I think for me, the key thing is then that post-support locally through our incubators that Tavin spoke about very clearly. Now, we may say, why Silicon Valley? Because if you look at it, we are very short of venture capital funding. So as we head to the fourth industrial revolution and we're talking about how do we then access all of the new skills, at the same time, you're looking at what are the new technologies or startup companies that would be producing the technologies. Not only the technologies, but what are the business models that will sustain them? And rightfully so, if you look at startups, it's the only way to disrupt corporate South Africa, to say they'd have to watch out because the new startups are looking at new industries that would be created for the future for South Africa and for Africa. So we're really looking at how do we disrupt the market and how do you get these startups to be supported locally.
That's exactly it. And one thing that you mentioned is the post-support. One thing that's very, very critical in an incubation program or accelerator is what happens afterwards. It's very interesting to see people boast about their statistics. We've helped 5,000 people, 20,000 people. You just ask them, where are they today?
Yeah.
There's no answer. So looking at how do you help someone with their finances? How do you help someone file their taxes? How do you help someone with equity sharing, splitting, dividends? Those are the critical elements that can cripple an organization or boost it to fly. And this conversation wouldn't be fit without the roping in of an actual startup. I'd like to invite the audience to please get your brains warmed up. If you have any questions, we'll be opening up the audience to a session of Q&A. But before we do that, I'd like to engage Mr. Ko Ngobeni. He is the co-founder, if I'm mistaken, and CEO of a technology platform that does exactly that. It bridges the startups, it bridges the youth, it bridges high school, it bridges colleges with the relevant technological actors in the marketplace, facilitating that conversation of what is my next step? What do I do next? Where am I? If I'm in grade 9, what do I study today that will prepare me for when I'm 25? A lot of the things that we look at now is the chicken or the egg. Which one comes first? Do we need the resources now because there's a large demand? Or do we reinvent the whole model and start at a younger age, grade 6, grade 5, whereby we start prepping our students to be engaged for the fourth industrial revolution? So with this being said, I'd like to hand it over to you. Nico.
All right, thanks. Just want to start with my name. My name is Misho. So yes, a lot of people get the X quite wrong. No problem.
It's the African in me, sorry.
All right, no problems. So as mentioned, I'm from Geek Culture, which is a tech platform for connecting young people to the world of technology. We want to do things different. We want to approach things different. Even the way we spell our name is completely different. I can bet you now a lot of you will spell it wrong if I asked you to spell it. It's the way we want to think and or the way we want to approach and encourage young people to say, let's think different. Let's approach this tech world differently. There's a huge talk about industry for AR and what's going on, and we want to move away from the talk and actually do stuff on the ground. So what Geek Culture is about is really connecting young people to the world of technology from universities as well. Universities are great institutions, but they don't expose young people to what's happening outside from the what they're teaching us is usually old stuff that we probably don't need when you go to industry. When you get to industry, industry says we're not skilled enough. So Geek Culture is really trying to bridge that gap, and we say, okay, let university do what university does. We don't want to disturb that yet.
That's a key word.
Yes, it's quite important. Let's start with building and building the skill set. Let's expose these guys while they're in university. Let us expose them, put them in the same rooms as the IT companies. So we deal a lot with a lot of IT companies where it's no longer you're reading about a Microsoft and Intel and IBM. We literally can take you to the offices. They can come to you. We can have workshops between the two parts, and they get to learn directly from them. We do a lot of workshops. We have hackathons as well, which is now, again, industry is saying skill sets, skill sets, skill sets. For us, hackathons are a platform of saying, come test your skills, what you've learned in university, what you've learned in these workshops that we've had, and actually build something. Once again, what you said in terms of Mr. Alan Ray's, in terms of build something for your community. So we take problems from industry, literally anywhere, any sector, government. Last year we did a hackathon with DPSA. Close to 250 young people from across the country came to solve problems for the public sector. So that's what we're trying to do in terms of Geek Culture. But what we realize is, once again, where it takes anything between 50 and 100 young people throughout the holidays, instead of them sitting and watching Disney Network, Cartoon Network, and all that stuff, they come through and then they learn how to build apps, how to play around in robotics, the Mindstorms that you mentioned. They learn about your VR. They don't just sit and hear about it, they play around it. But we take it a step further and you say, while you're learning, think about a particular problem in your area and apply. So there's an element of learning and applying in terms of your real life problem at the same time. And obviously they have presentations at the end. We decided then to filter back to primary schools as well, because we realized there's still another gap there. So we literally are doing a pipeline and preparing young people for this space. And that's why I like this panel that's here. Basically, it's good that I'm the last one to speak, because a lot of the things that we need, a lot of things that we've been doing, the next step is for them to connect with you guys. There's a lot of young people that, last year we were running a program with Red Bull, where 5 young people came up with ideas. And in 2 months, we helped them fast-track the ideas to the next level. But the next level is not with us. The next level is with you guys. The next level is them learning about the business side of things, learning about how to take it to markets and all those things. So for us to prepare for this space, to prepare for what's coming, I mean, a lot of people fear that jobs will be taken. I don't really believe that. Yes, jobs will change. We just have to adapt and actually prepare ourselves for what's coming. And part of that is really grooming the young people. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have kids. No, let me not expose anyone. But if you look at how a kid adapts to things around them, how they pick up a language, how they learn something very quickly, it's because they're thrown with their stuff information very quickly. And we don't have to wait for a late period to do that. We can actually start doing that now, where they learn basic things. Instead of playing with robots, they learn the elements of what you can do with the robotic stuff of things. They start building, and that's what we are busy doing now with a whole bunch of the tech community that we have.
Thank you very much. Sure. Are there any questions noted from the audience? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oscar from Netlotlo Trading Enterprise. My question is that we hear a good things about the what government try to implement. nice about the learnerships and the internships. The big problem that we have, after they've been trained there, get into the learnership internship, they don't, public sector, private sector, they don't absorb those learners. They become seated at home, useless and the qualification that they have, because it doesn't utilize that qualification, because qualification without utilizing it is good as in paper. Until we after training, we absorb those academics, those TVT students coming from college. We cannot bridge that particular gap of unemployment until we do something. Public and private come together.
Thank you. Panel, feel free for anyone to jump in. I'd like to add on to that. It's a new notion called shelf technology, something that is a great idea, a great innovation, but it doesn't get taken up. It just sits in a publication on a shelf and it dies. How do we then foster that, okay, here's a young individual that has come up with an innovation that isn't anywhere else in the world, and it addresses a local demand and challenge in South Africa? How does that person, after being skilled, learned, and there's a large culture in South Africa of people that are certificated but not practically trained. The people have the qualifications, but moving on to say this is something that we can build from bottom up is something that we need to address. Panel.
Okay, thank you for that, Sakhile. Just to address your question at the back, so we run a number of learnerships and internships, and what we've realized is exactly that. And we've been looking at putting the learners and the interns through a program which relates to the skills that are required for the future. So in other words, we give them entrepreneurial thinking, innovative thinking, creative thinking, and they learn decisive making. So we have a program that runs for a few weeks, and by giving them that skills, we try to create a culture of entrepreneurship. So moving away from you've been employed by an employer, but rather becoming the future startup or employee. And I think very clearly what Sakhile has latched onto is we've created an internship called a commercialization internship, which is a specialized internship where we have interns that either have their masters in science or technology, and basically they then get commercialization exposure. They then look at the higher education institutes, and basically they look at the IP sitting on the shelf and which ones could be commercialized. So over the past 5 years, we've trained about 50 of them, and all of them have been taken up. So we were actually preparing them for technology transfer offices to look exactly at that. But because of the skill they have acquired over time, they got taken up by IP firms, venture capital partners, and some of them are now sitting even internationally. So very, very key is how do we take the learners and the interns that are currently doing some form of technical skill, and how do we look at what are the opportunities to create businesses out of that, linked to technology, low-end technology as well.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, can I just add to that response?
Go for it, bro.
Thanks. Hi. My perspective is that often people focus on either a supply-side intervention or a demand-side intervention. We talk in these orthodox economic terms. But if I'm not mistaken, one of the priorities of the president, as part of his State of the Nation address, is inclusive growth, which is growth that includes local communities, that includes job seekers, so it's a different way of looking at the problem. And I think more and more, in previous years we did have growth, but a lot of that growth was also without jobs as well. Even when we were growing under Trevor Manuel and Becky and all that, sort of back in that era, there was growth, but there weren't jobs. And so I think slowly what I'm seeing in the policy discourse is this notion of inclusive growth and moving away and doing things differently.
Next question. I'd like to take the last question as we wrap up the session. Please introduce yourself and your organization.
Okay, my name is Sakhile Dhlamini. I work for an organization called Mindworks. I was just looking at the jobs of the future, and for me, they will be tilted towards countries or economies that that have very good STEM skills. Now, when you look at South Africa, we have a huge challenge when it comes to STEM skills. And when you look at the unemployed, the young people who are highly unemployable in South Africa, they lack those skills. So therefore, my question is, what is it that can be done to make sure that we prepare these young people for the jobs of the future?
Thank you. Before that goes straight to the panel, I'd like to pose this initial response to Ms. Carrie Joost from the DBSA. Carrie, I'd like for you to address the question the gentleman has shared in relation to the YES program, Harambee, and Microsoft partnerships, whereby it deals with the grassroots innovation and challenges that are in the communities, as you had mentioned, in Tembisa, that isn't in the suburbs, but directly where the challenges are needed. Carrie.
Thanks. It's actually a great question. So one of the solutions that we're proposing, we actually refer to STEAM skills now. So we've included the arts in that because creativity, whether it's creative thinking, the expression across the arts is also a critical skill for the future. So these D-Labs that have been conceptualized speak exactly like Sakhile said, is to access to the STEAM skills. And when you start looking at the jobs crisis or the youth challenge with unemployment now, we actually need to look at the full value chain, which means ECD. We actually need to start right back there and create the full spectrum of access to the skills, whether it's the science, the maths, and the technology, arts that I've mentioned. The other key thing is also, and this is, I suppose this is always an interesting topic, so you'll have to cut me off because we can go on forever, is what does maths for the future look like? Is it the same? So we're sitting with, I've mentioned Udacity University, that is, you can get online. I mean, a few weeks ago, some of us were in the States at Udacity University driving in an autonomous vehicle that had been pre-coded by kids from Africa who didn't have a full school education around science and maths. So what that taught us is we actually don't need to be taught the way we've been taught. We need to start looking at how we teach, what we teach. Is it the full spectrum of maths, or is it the components that fit with the skills and the jobs? So that's why the hub's accompanied with, and I think it might tag to the other gentleman's question, is when we look at the jobs and the absorption and that for the future, we need to look at this whole ecosystem. So how, if we're going to take on learnerships, is who needs the skills? So that we're very intentional. So to go trigger the private sector to say, what skills do you need? How can we support access to those skills? Train someone up so that they also fit your organizational culture, as an example. So those are ways that we're busy doing that. And it's very much for people who have not had access before, because that's actually our future.
Perfect. Thank you very much, panel. I'd like to take the opportunity to wrap up the panel session. This was the fourth industrial revolution, South Africa and Silicon Valley to the globe. One thing that is a big key takeaway from our discussion today is the communication and the coordination of a tri-party alliance between government, private sector, as well as education. Education is always looking at how best can we skill our students. Government is always looking at the regulation and the ramifications of the technology. And the private sector is looking at the risk. How do we manage it and how do we mitigate it? I believe if we continue this conversation between these three stakeholder engagements, we'll definitely see South Africa be on a rise and rise. Thank you. Until next time.
How do you feel after that? Because my brain is going zoo, you know? There were serious terminologies there. Your silicone, your VR, your AV. I felt challenged. I felt extremely challenged. But thank you very much to the panel. Thank you so much, Sanisha, as well, for seeing potential in a young person and actually giving them a chance. I think politics needs to learn a lesson or two from that. Are we still okay? If you are feeling restless, there are some candies and sweets on your table. So just eat. You know, and endearments are very addictive.